I will call the capital planning committee for the town of Ayer to order on Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. First item on the agenda is review and approval of the minutes for, we have January 19th available. That was distributed. Any changes or edits to the minutes?
I make a motion that the minutes be approved as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Minutes are approved unanimously. And number 3, we have Kitty Junction. We're going to move that down on the order just simply because with Jeff Mayo coming to discuss that, and he doesn't get back into town until around 5:30. So we're going to move on to review and discussion of the fire department FY 2024 capital request for the ladder truck replacement. We have handouts.
So Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Chief, do you want? So at the last meeting, and we've been reviewing the issue of the ladder truck throughout this process, and the chief has illustrated the need and so forth. And the discussion had come to a point where it's at 1.6 million, that obviously the funding mechanism would be a debt exclusion. And then the question came up last time about the idea of potentially using another funding source like capital stabilization to maybe offset that impact or so forth. So in preparation for the last meeting, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara. Barbara, what we're passing around to walk you through, she did a tax impact analysis with respect to the ladder, and she will sort of walk us through what that would look like.
So what I did is I did a tax impact based on the pumper, the bridge, and the ladder.
Okay.
And then I did 2 scenarios below, one with using capital stabilization for the ladder, one was using half of the price of the ladder for capital stabilization. So if you look at the first orange column that says cumulative tax rate roll-off, I just want to point out, so this is the cumulative roll-off over the next 10 years based on debt that's set to retire. So we have some significant debt impacts decreasing. And then in the middle 2 columns, we have the rate impact. Scenario A is if we simply finance all 3 debt exclusions, the amount, the rate, and the impact on immediate household value, which is at $447,000. And then again, B is if we use a stabilization, how it will impact the rate, and C if we use half of it. And then the third 2 columns, again in orange, is the cumulative impact. So what I did is I took the amount of the debt rolling off and added in the amount of the debt it would increase from the debt exclusions, and we still will have a negative rate impact for the next few years. Now, granted, this is just based on fiscal 23 information, and it doesn't include any other borrowing authorizations. It's just the debt exclusions. So on the second and third page, I just for your information so you could see, I wanted it to be easy to see on the first page. And on the second and third, it's just, I expanded it so you can see the additional columns, the year-to-year impact versus the cumulative roll-off of debt, and then the 3 projected debt amounts for the 3, the pumper, the ladder, and the bridge, the total of projected debt for those 3 debt exclusions, and then the other 2 is what we already saw. So I just wanted you to see the detail that was driving behind
It appears we'd be in a good place even with those.
So in my opinion, it's a good time, because if you don't replenish your debt as it's rolling off strongly, then you're going to end up with huge spikes in the future on your budget when you do need to.
And no one likes that.
Nobody likes that.
So when's that pumper, we put that last year, right, Tim?
Yeah, so the pumper should be in sometime in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you see the pumper is, you look at the projected debt, the $95,250, that's going out to bond in the spring, and I did do a projected amount for fiscal 24. on that amount. The bridge, I did a projected amount where it would start hitting in fiscal '25, because that's something we're gonna need to do right away. And the ladder truck we're projecting won't hit till fiscal '26 as far as bond issues, because of, it's gonna be a 22-month
Yep, 22,
lag
24 months,
from the time
yep.
it gets approved at town
Correct.
meeting and debt exclusion, we're gonna have, so it's gonna be 2 years out. So
Yep.
I didn't add that into the impact until fiscal '26.
So ultimately, the impact of the ladder standalone is about 6 cents on the rate impact.
And the bridge, we don't have that kicking in till 25.
I have that, yeah, for '25, because we have to wait for the debt exclusion to pass at the election, after it passes that annual, assuming it passes that annual town meeting. And then I can borrow, if I borrow during fiscal '24, we won't have debt hitting until the next fiscal year on our budget. So I hope this kind of gives a viewpoint,
Yes.
on kind of where we stand. We have a lot of excluded debt coming off in the next few years. We have a lot of other debt coming off in the next few years. Things kind of come in cycles, I think, and you have these 20-year things and then you don't have a lot. And we also kind of had minimal debt, I think partly because of COVID, that we kind of held off on some things,
We did, that's why we're expensive this year.
Yeah, which is why I think we have more going on this year.
And we do need some depth, so.
Yeah, it's kind of important to have, that it's considered
Yeah, but
fiscally
how
sound.
much?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you gotta be under control, cheap money, so.
Cheap
Yeah,
money.
it is, rates are still decent. We have a strong bond rating. So we do usually get a premium on our bond issues, so we usually get a very good rate when we borrow.
So,
Thank you, Robert.
So, Mr. Chair, so in looking at it, I mean, it's always the challenge any municipality has with these big needs, and everybody knows that, and nobody's minimizing, the cost impact, and ultimately, it will be up to town meeting and through the ballot, and hence, as you all know, that's debt exclusion is sort of that two-part process. I appreciate Barbara putting this together, because we looked at, because folks are always asking, what about, using reserves to offset or some other funding source to offset it? And so, I mean, the capital stabilization is just at about
It's actually at 3.4.
at 3.4 million, which has taken, at least in my time, and it started before that, a long time, to build up. And my concern is it's sort of like that precious emergency. What I'm getting at is, if we use even a portion of the capital stabilization or all of it, it could take conservatively 2 or 3 years just to replenish, a partial piece of it. And that's also assuming that our free cash trajectory stays at that 1 to 1.5 million, which it's been sometimes 2 on a couple occasions, which it's been, recently, but we can't, guarantee that. So I'm just saying, from my vantage point, it's up to the committee, I think the recommendation for the debt exclusion for the full amount would be the best financial approach, and as Barbara mentioned too, and not try to offset it because it's negligible in terms of the capital stabilization.
If I may just
No, I'll
interject
get one
too,
before.
historically in Ayer, they have used capital stabilization for some of these smaller capital items and then replenished, and we've been traditionally able to replenish immediately with our free cash. So I took a look at some of the lower amounts. I've usually seen it spend things for under 70,000 or under 50, which would next year be about 313,000, or if we included some of the $60,000 to $68,000 items we approved, 442,000. So I'd recommend still doing that for next year. So we will be using capital stabilization, and then assuming free cash can replenish it, I'd still recommend we do that.
So if we don't touch the 3.4 million in the capital stabilization right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What will it be? Just curious. What will it be next year?
Well, so, I mean, I can't really, investment earnings have been so
All right,
volatile.
let me change it. What was it last year? I mean, what was the last amount?
Putting,
So we put significant amount in it last year.
I'm just pulling it up, yeah.
I want to say.
Uh,
So for the last 3 years, we've actually been putting significant amounts of our free cash in capital.
So for what reason we put it in there? So my feeling is we put it in there for capital
yeah,
stabilization.
so
So why, if we're putting, the people's money we're putting in there, why are we not taking it out or using some of it? So we're not, take a little bit of burden off the taxpayers.
So there's been two approaches to building capital stabilization. One is, as Robert alluded to have a decent backfall in case we do have a catastrophic large capital. You know, we just use, you know, round numbers, like some things say it was $10 million that suddenly we had to unexpectedly replace. We could draw from that to relieve some of the impact on the taxpayer. The other approach has been with the pending possibility of a new elementary school, is we can utilize that during the time of the elementary school impact to lessen the impact that either the elementary school itself has on the taxpayer, or we can use it towards other capital projects during that time frame in order to lessen the overall tax impact.
So that is why we beefed it up, yeah, we increased it. And again, I do also recommend that we do use some of the capital stabilization for those smaller items.
I haven't heard anybody saying anything about schools, building a new school or anything. Nothing from the school department up there.
So
Why
we're
are
waiting.
we gonna?
So the school department's coming to the select board at the next meeting to go over budget, and the select board has been pushing the school committee to put in a letter of intent for a new elementary school to replace Page Hilltop within the boundaries of there. And we have confirmation, which we should be getting at the select board meeting, that they will be putting that letter of intent in this spring, which is the next cycle.
And Mr. Chair, just to Mr. Pennard's question, last year was 1.5 million. Was
In
put
the capital
in the
savings,
capital
we
savings.
put it in.
Put it in.
James?
And my thing is, I still like the idea if we can keep the tax expenses pretty close to the same. That's with going into this debt exclusion. You know, there's no big jumps up and down. We just kind of have it smooth. You know, it's different. It's money, but for my money, if it's I like things to kind of be regulated as much as we can. That's what I like. And you're right, we could take money there, but then we wouldn't raise the tax expenses then the next time. Now we got to raise it by too large a percent in addition to the regular 2.5. So
Whatever you recommend, I did give, two of the scenarios is using half of the cost of the ladder truck with capitalization and one using it all. So the information is there for you.
we're looking ahead a lot, but there's a lot of building going on in this town. Everything is going up. I mean, I know we have to have better police, better fire, better DPW and everything, but there should be some more money coming in with all this building and everything, taxes. There should be something coming in.
What was the estimated growth number this year?
So last year it was 689,000. I'm still waiting.
Okay.
And she's predicting it's going to be more than that. But I don't have her figures yet.
So we are getting a much larger tax base growth every year, but the one thing that we do to be cognizant of is that we're a small town geographically, and at some point we're going to hit build out. And that number is going to start coming down.
Mr. Chair, I have one
Yes,
question.
please.
Barbara, can I ask you a question? Am I correct if you use capital stabilization money and once town meeting is over, you can actually purchase those items right away? Is that a correct statement? So you don't have to wait till July 1st if it's out of capital stabilization because the money's already there?
So it still has to be approved.
No, it has to be approved at town meeting.
And then if it's a debt exclusion
Understood about that, but the smaller
It's
items,
not.
like,
Yeah.
for instance, like the Chiefs car, if that would have come out of stabilization, if I remember correctly, you can just go purchase that. Is that a correct statement? You don't have to wait, like, you used to have to wait till July 1st or something, since that money's already there. It's not like a debt exclusion where I understand you have to wait for ballot.
If it's not a debt exclusion, you're right, you don't have to wait for a
Yeah.
ballot, but annual town meeting, unless you have a special before annual, is still for
Yeah.
as of July 1st,
Yeah,
the next
yeah.
fiscal year.
Because that's when the year
But
begins.
you don't have to worry about funding source coming,
Yeah.
because the money is already
Right, and my
there.
point being is,
So-
such as the small items like that, as soon as town meeting's over, you can go try to secure that, because we're a little ahead of the game a little bit.
Yeah.
So, things are hard to get. That's what I remember last year. I forget what the item was, but I remember the former town accountant saying, oh, you can go get that right now, because there's money there. And then I wasn't sure if it was capital stabilization or not.
Yeah, if something's been approved, even if it hasn't been borrowed for yet, because I think what she usually gets at, then you can, as long as the borrowing happens before the end of a fiscal year, you
Yeah.
can spend before the borrowing happens
Yeah.
within that fiscal year. That's
Yeah.
what she usually would approve.
Okay.
So you just have to make sure we have, the resources
Yeah.
available, and where Ayer is in a good, strong situation, we do have that ability.
Yep.
For example, there were some things approved last year that you could purchase now, even though I'm not going to get the funding for them
Yeah.
for another 2 months.
Yep.
But they do have to be approved at annual town meeting, and it is
Correct.
for the July 1st of the next.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep. So Scott, at what point don't we need, if there was an emergency came up and we needed to do something with money or whatever, is there a certain amount of money or do we just, Robert, you would take it? I'm just saying if something happened, we needed some money right away. We don't need the townspeople to vote for that, correct? We can just do it? Can you just do it?
For capital stabilization.
You can't just do it.
In general, I mean,
So it would depend on what it's for. So
Yeah, right.
we do have some funds available. We still have ARPA funds.
Yeah.
We have UDAC funds available. If it was a capital project that we had to do on an emergency, it would have to be a special town meeting that we could call quickly to get approval for that.
Yeah, so to Scott's point, so just hypothetical, say a $4 million infrastructure catastrophe happens, it happens tonight. Dan, of course, I'm not trying to stress you out.
I'm not worth it.
Yeah, but of course, and I know you know this, we would immediately do the work.
Right.
The select board would convene an emergency meeting. We would notify the Department of Revenue that this issue has happened. The select board would have to call a special town meeting, and then the people would have to vote. So to Scott's point, there are some reserves, whether it's UDAG or opera, on smaller things. But to activate the stabilization requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting. So
kind of agree with what Rick said is you're talking about the school. I know nothing's been brought in front of us. You guys just said that they're in the box works. I know we don't have a crystal ball here, so we can't look 3, 4, 5 years in a row. What's going to happen to this town? Okay, I'm just looking. I guess I run a company. I have savings. I put money away, for rainy days too. Okay, I understand, but I'm just saying we're sitting at $3.4 million in capital stabilization right now. If we help bring that cost of that ladder truck down a little bit, we're taking a burden off the people. It's going to go in their tax dollars. They're going to pay, and I hate to tell you, the tax dollars they're creeping up here. It's not cheap. I'm just thinking about older people, young people. I have sons that live in this town. I mean, they can't. I'm just saying we have money. What'd you say? I'm just saying we got money. I understand what you guys are saying. I totally agree, but I don't know. I just hate to put the burden on all the tax dollars on the people. I'm just thinking up for them.
Barbara, on this, am I saying this, do I have to say through Mr. Chair?
no, I'm overly formal, I'm sorry.
All right, I just want to make sure.
Less
I'm learning how to do these things, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm really new to this. So, looking at this, there would be no increase to tax rates.
So there's always going to be an increase to the tax rate based on other calculations.
Okay,
This is simply for the effect of the debt exclusions that we're addressing right now. So
Okay.
because we have other debt rolling off, including other
Mhm.
debt exclusions finishing up, it's a good time to, in my opinion, to add more, so that you don't have such a big spike. My concern as a employee here would be that if you have a large decrease and then a spike because all of a sudden things come in need instead of leveling out when you do things, you're gonna have these big decreases and then big increases, and that can cause tight budget constraints and
Okay.
a lot of confusion. So it's my opinion to try to keep things as level as possible. Last year we had we had a significant amount of debt come off. And then looking at the draft one in the budget, because of that, adding in just other authorized and planned debt, it looks like a high increase because it went so low already. So I'm trying to prevent that from continuing from happening. So that's why I suggested we just do these debt exclusions this way, use these smaller items, which I can do just about $500,000 out of the capital stabilization, and then if free cash is available, replenish them to offset the tax rate that way. Just because it is just a good time with the debt.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Slowly but surely, yes.
It is.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, because I don't want to get too far off because there's a debt
Yeah.
exclusion block over here and then
Yeah.
debt. So we're really, it's
Yes.
two different.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
This only shows the impact of the debt exclusion
Right.
against the tax rate, not anything else authorized that's.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I have a very odd question, probably more unique just specifically to the situation. Is it possible to change the funding source? So if we were to approve this to go through the debt exclusion, say the schools put in for the new elementary, they don't get it. They get pushed off a year. Next year when capital reconvenes, could we shift the funding to come out of capital stabilization?
Because the ladder's 2 years off, is that
Yes,
what you're
because we
asking?
won't have taken possession of the ladder.
So, that's a good question. I mean, could we put it in the article that you could determine the funding source based on future needs?
That's a
I
really,
don't know.
no, that's actually a really good question. So what,
Because I understand Jimmy's point.
Yeah.
We're squirreling away,
I
we're
get it.
squirreling away, and at some point,
Yeah.
the taxpayers are going to start saying, like, why are we
Yeah.
not using this? And we're looking at the elementary school, but if we get a little longer runway before the elementary school is going to come on board, it behooves us to try to use some of it to offset, whether it's the fire truck, even though we need to get that approved this year, or next year, it looks like we have like 3.2 million, proposed for debt exclusions next year.
Mr. Chair, can you just, for my benefit, just
That's a good question.
give that scenario again, just so I have it clear?
So if we were to approve the fire truck to be funded through the debt exclusion, so it passes town meeting and it passes at the ballot.
Yeah.
But then, since we're not taking possession of it for almost 2 years,
Yeah.
it's next year when capital reconvenes, if we see it fit, the capital planning can request, and I don't know who would be the actual decision maker, but make a recommendation that we shift the funding from the debt exclusion when the truck comes in to utilization of capital stabilization.
And you still would do the borrowing?
We approve it for the borrowing, but then next year it would come out of the capital stabilization if the schools don't get, depending on what else we have in capital at that point
Now,
too.
my question is, will you receive the funds? See, because we gotta be careful when you get borrowed money and leave it sitting around to earn interest. What's that term that,
Arbitrage.
yes,
So,
stay away from that.
whether we passed it this coming spring as a debt exclusion or capital, I wouldn't borrow the money until we had a date that it would arrive
okay.
for. So that's why in my projections, the ladder wouldn't hit till fiscal 26 at a minimum.
Okay, so we would
Because
be,
I won't borrow the money or
so
anything.
we'll be in no danger of having the money. So,
Yeah, and that's partly to
Stay
not
away
have
from
an
that.
arbitrage penalty.
okay.
Yeah, I guess the other thing, looking ahead to next year, at least per what was submitted, the Sandy Pond Beach Rehab house is on that for $500,000, and so you have to be cognizant of the cost for that too.
We want to have the correct answer, Mr. Chair. That's an excellent question. We would have to check on that.
Okay. I
As
was
to see what the options
just
would
wanted to
be.
throw that wrench in the works.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, myself, I would support it just as a debt exclusion.
With the option to change. I mean, we could, yep, I'll have to find that.
So what
That's
I'm-
my financial advisor.
So what I'm hearing, Scott, is essentially we would approve the debt,
Mhm.
and then going into next year, we'd say, oh, we approved the debt because we wanted to keep the capital stabilization whole for other purposes, but now that we're here, we don't have to, so we can access some of that capital stabilization. Therefore, we don't have to fund all of the debt that we approved.
We don't have to borrow.
Bar.
Yeah.
The request has to be approved
Yeah.
this year.
Right.
So that
Mhm.
the chief can put in the order
Yeah.
and we can get on the wait list. But then the funding mechanism isn't necessarily needed for another 22 to 24 months.
In that way, we take care of some of the stuff Jimmy was talking about.
Right, and then then like at the fall town meeting, for
Mhm.
example. Yeah,
Yeah, and I also think after the next select board meeting, I'm assuming with the schools, we'll have a little more discussion around potential elementary school and get a better sense of that.
So I can ask the question
yeah,
about an
I
email
will
to
too,
our
yeah.
financial advisor. And that's it.
So I guess the question for the committee is, you know, we have the ladder truck that needs approval, and we also need to identify our funding source, if we want to do that tonight, or if we want to wait until a later meeting to do that, and wait for Ms. Tierney to get the information that we've requested.
Well, we have to have a fire truck. There's no doubt about it. We have to fix the bridge. These are things that have to be done. And we have to do Katy Junction down there. So I don't know what you want to do as far as voting for it, or you want to wait.
I'm asking the committee, I'm looking for feedback from the members.
Yeah.
What do you, if we don't touch the 3.4 million in capital stabilization right now?
Yeah.
Say, we really don't, we just have to approve it to get the fire truck. Do we have to declare how we're gonna pay for it now to tell the taxpayers? Do we have to
Yes.
declare that now for town meeting, right?
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
our dilemma right now. We need to figure out how we're gonna bring that in front of them.
Right,
But we're not gonna pay for that for 2 years.
right.
Okay, the pumper, which we approved last year, is coming on board in the spring, correct?
Whenever Barbara borrows it, yeah, but in the fall, we'll receive
The
it.
bridge, once you approve that, that's gonna get done right away. We're not waiting for that. That's gonna hopefully get done, right? Kitty
So
Junction.
yeah, that's the plan.
I know Kitty Junction with the
Yeah.
playground's coming in front of us to talk about. I know we talked about a few other scenarios for that one.
Yeah.
So I was saying, in 2 years, what will this capital stabilization be if we keep putting money into it over the next couple of years? What will that be in?
So, sorry.
No, go ahead.
What do you
It'll
think
depend on
it-
what free cash is. So we're still, the way that the budget's generally put together is we go through our operating, we have our assessments, et cetera. Whatever we have left over, we're putting into stabilization with the majority of it going into the capital portion of it. I think we're doing like a 75-25 split historically over the last few years. So if there's a potential for hundreds of thousands of dollars more to go in this year, depending on where we land on free cash, which I think is trending close to our historical average over the last 5 years.
Yep.
So next year we could be looking at say like 4 to 4.5 million in capital stabilization.
You know, and keep in mind too, when I did these debt projections, I didn't take into account for the bridge any potential grants. I went with a whole 3.5 million.
Right.
The pumper is what it is. Ladder truck will be what it is, but
Yeah, Jim, as the chair said, probably, again, wish we had a crystal ball. If free cash trends roughly stayed the same conservatively, you could look at just shy of $1 million each year on capital. So in 2 years, it'd be another 2, so you'd be looking at borrowing, using it about approaching 5.
With this new finance committee, they probably gonna be stingy on money, so we're gonna have less free cash. We gotta remember that.
How much of an impact is this going to have on the taxpayer?
I think it's 3 versus.
A rough
The
idea
ladder
of
truck?
dollar amount.
so the ladder truck by itself, I can go pull that out of my office. I did a combined one. So if we financed all 3 of those debt amounts fully, it would average about $98 a year for all 3. on the tax
Per
bill
person.
per household.
Per household.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. But that's not taking into account other debt expiring. So, yeah, and if we did not use the ladder truck, we're looking around $71, and then it'll go down to $67, and again, that's before decreasing any other debt coming off.
So Scott, through you, so
Mhm.
I'm gonna probably flip a little bit here.
Sorry.
I think it's good to build money up. I know we got a lot of stuff coming up in the future. Do we know what it is? No, we don't, but I like having a cushion. So I think now that Barbara said what it's gonna affect a medium household per year, $100, that's nothing. I think we should shoot for the debt. Really, sorry, Rick, but I really,
I love
seriously,
Rick.
we need the money built, we worked so hard at building the money up
Yeah.
to make our town feel safe and have a cushion. I think we should now that I'm thinking about it, I think for what Barbara said, for that, it's not really gonna, it's a lot of money. $100 for a lot of people, but it's better than, let's keep the cushion.
And
Let's keep the cushion.
And that's without accounting for the other debt coming off.
Correct, and exactly.
And
Yep.
or other borrow authorizations, but yeah.
And that's my thinking, we keep things kind of on a level keel. You know, you can deal with the voters much better.
Exactly, and like
down.
Robin and Scott said, we could be hitting $4 million in that next year.
You jump it up and
Yeah.
down, they're gonna wonder, what are you guys doing?
We're trying to make the town safe and.
No, I mean, we jump
I know,
up and
yeah,
down.
right, I know.
And I'll understand your point, that doesn't make sense to me. I would say keep things on even keel if you possibly can. Now, sometimes you may not be able to do it.
Right.
And just one observation on the idea of the even keel or steadiness is the school in the future.
Yeah.
Which would be if we weren't building this reserve, conscious of this, all of a sudden, huge spike. But since we're putting this aside now, that would lessen that spike.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is, also that cushion offers us the opportunity to look at, some capital projects I don't want to say outside the box, but that can really transition the town, that outside of the normal operations, in replacement of the equipment that we have.
Like traffic lights at Maine and Washington. I digress.
I read that thread on the community page. It was
Totally digress.
very entertaining.
This money that's gonna go into this account, is this earmarked specifically for the ladder truck and the bridge and everything? Somebody's gonna come like Dan saying he needs $1 million for a new well pump died or something, he needs that money right away. He gonna be able to pull that money out?
So if we decide to, do a debt exclusion for all three of those items, that money is specifically for those three items.
Specific.
If we don't spend it all, I don't borrow it all. So this is for example, the ladder truck, the bridge, if it comes in lower than anticipated, I'll only borrow what's anticipated. And actually, a quick segue if you don't mind. So every few years, in anticipation of that, we'll do like a little cleanup. We're planning to do that at this annual town meeting. So just to show you, these are some from like 2015 to 2019. We wait a few years until after the capital projects are complete and make sure we don't need, any additional borrowing. But at this year's annual town meeting, we'll be rescinding about $205,000 worth of authorized debt which we never borrowed for. So we do, and so this is what I'm getting. So this is stuff that we had approved these amounts at annual town meeting. We didn't need it all, so we never borrowed the amount, and we'll be rescinding them off of those particular
So Barbara,
debt
what
projects.
was the police station roof at? We're getting 115,000 that wasn't used. What was that at?
It was
Just rough.
235, I think, and then I know I only copied and pasted a little piece of this because this is a huge spreadsheet that I look at, and I was not here in 2017,
Trying to
but I
remember.
think there might have been a grant associated with it, but I
Yeah.
could be wrong.
Jim, I can find the answer. We'll get the answer.
No,
I did verify.
that's the biggest one right there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
everyone has
and
the
it
biggest
is,
one.
it is
Yeah.
coming off, and I did
Yeah.
confirm it with our financial advisor and with accounting, that those projects are complete, and they've been complete for over 5 years. So they are coming up. We never borrowed those amounts.
Okay.
So this is just to show you like how
And where will that money go back into?
So it never happened.
Never
So
happened.
we did these
Okay.
authorizations at town meeting. We didn't need to spend everything
Okay.
we authorized. So I'm gonna do an article at town meeting rescinding them from the authorizations. And we never borrowed that money. We never received it. We never spent it.
So this is mainly a book
It's a
entry, so
housekeeping entry,
speaking.
but I just wanted to show you, these
Yeah.
things can happen with future authorizations.
All right, so it's 6:30 or 5:35,
Oh,
sorry.
really good.
So it sounds like we're ready to make a decision on the ladder truck for funding.
So I make a motion that we purchase a ladder truck under the debt exclusion.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye, passes unanimously. Excellent, thank you everyone, thank you Barbara.
Thank you.
For all the information, thank you Chief.
Yeah, thanks. Where's your license?
So up next, the next two items are the DPW. Jim, you want to come on up? And we can start with whichever one you prefer. If you want to start with the bridge, we can do the bridge. Leave it up to you.
Yeah, why don't we just start with the bridge since we were kind of just talking about it. So I don't have any update here, basically the same presentation as last meeting. It stands as we need about 3.5 million in the request in order to fulfill the need to complete the bridge project. I have been working with our engineers already to get that rebid, so we had a call today on that as well. So, and we're continuing to seek funding as well. I was looking out for grants today, even seeing if there's anything applicable, but we'll keep going on track with that as well.
So there's still potential we could have offsetting funds available.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we're just looking at our potential utility agreement with MassDOT as well. There's several options out there that we're looking into and seeing if we can leverage and use.
And whatever you get will generate a sheet like this.
Robert?
And Barbara, Dan and I met on this as well. And from our vantage point, and thanks to Dan's efforts, we know that the 3.5 million, the good news, the 3.5 is the number. And if the committee recalls, that also includes the contingency, right? The 12.
Right. Yeah, it's
It has the
fully loaded.
contingency in it.
yeah.
Now, we know the bridge has to be done as discussed. I mean, we are already running the risk it could be closed. In looking at this, there's still some variables leading up until we get to town meeting, and I'm going to be cautiously optimistic and say that they're favorable. What do I mean? So if we recommended to the select board authorization for debt exclusion not to exceed 3.5 million. It goes back to what Barbara was just saying, we borrow, well, we need the authorization, but we don't need. Recommending the debt exclusion for up to or not to exceed 3.5 million, contingent on further reductions from federal and state funding sources. And one of them, for example, is we believe there's going to be $500,000 small bridge grant.
Yeah. we're pretty
Dan is
confident.
working. We know that it's going to be, so 3.5 is, if you will, the ceiling. But the two pieces we definitively know we need to do the bridge, and we know the worst case scenario is 3.5 million. But in recommending, we're recommending the maximum amount, recommending the mechanism, which is a debt exclusion, subject to further reduction by federal and state funding sources. And you could put grants in there as well.
Will that be misleading to the voters? Say that doesn't happen.
So this is what I would say to that, right? So we're in February. What I'm getting at is this board makes recommendations
Okay.
that then go to the select board.
Okay.
The select board is going to ultimately approve the warrant on April the 4th.
Okay.
And the FinCom also make their recommendations on things. We will know by then, meaning in the warrant and so forth, we'll know what the exact number is. It's going to be less. Worst case scenario would be the 3.5, but it may be less.
So I was thinking
Yeah.
that your statement information to the voters wouldn't be correct. That's the only thing I was worried about. I was worried about saying it may not be 3.5, then it end up being 3.5. That's my
Okay.
what I was afraid of. I just do not want to say, say, well, we need 3.5. But, we may get, I don't know. I just don't like throwing stuff out that may or may not be true, and voters, they don't think we're trying to do a good job anyway. And they're going to say, well, you know it wasn't going to be there. I just want to make sure we can make statements that are clear in the best that we can do. Something I would want somebody to tell me.
I couldn't agree more, right? That's why we have, these conversations.
Okay.
Right.
So, Scott, how much money before we have in that account right now that was put towards the West Main Street Bridge?
We have remaining just about $1 million.
$1 million.
Yeah.
So $1 million plus the 3.5, so we're talking 4.5 million.
Correct.
That's what you say.
Now, you didn't pull that number just out of it. That's kind of a close number. You think that bridge,
Right. We
whatever you
updated
wanna
the
call it.
cost estimate.
So we kind of know, but the numbers might come in less though, right?
They could. Yeah.
Okay.
If it gets
So
more favorable.
4.5. So I just going through some notes here. We had approved. We were looking for 2.5. But now we're at 3.5.
Right. So yeah. So back in September, when you do the cost estimate, the prices increased since then.
So
Exponentially.
million
So 3.5.
Yeah.
We're hoping to get another grant for half, 500,000. So it
Right.
brings it down to 3 million, right?
Right.
And we need to go to the taxpayers for.
Right. And then
And we hope for
Let's
maybe the
keep-
bids will, maybe the things will come in a little less. Or maybe the numbers will come in.
yeah,
whatever.
right. We don't know what that'll be, but hopefully we get a good bid. And then in the meantime, there's a few other paths we're looking at for funding sources outside the town's sources. Political
Can I make a
and
motion, Scott?
infrastructure.
I would love a
I
motion.
make a motion, we approve $3.5 million for the West Main Street Bridge, culvert, whatever you want to call it. Debt exclusion, correct?
Correct.
I'll
Contingent-
second it.
Friendly,
Might as well, we've been
sorry.
talking about it for
Friendly-
4, 5, 6 meetings. might as well.
Friendly amendment, please.
Yeah, go
Debt
ahead.
exclusion contingent upon further reductions from state or federal funding before town meeting.
Thank you.
Do I have a?
I'll second it.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
And chair says aye. Passed unanimously.
Okay.
And I think when we're
I
presenting
agree.
this Dan, we really, take the.
That's right.
We got to really push this, telling people you've done studies on it. This bridge is, when it goes, and I think people will understand that that's the main
You're
freeway
right.
to
The
get
education and
Exactly.
getting the information
fire,
out there.
TV, fire,
Right. I mean,
ambulance,
that's really.
mutual aid to all these other towns. I mean, that's the only way to go. We
And I
need to
remember-
push that. I think it's got to be a real stir, almost like Alan Anoying when he did the cannon out here. He pushed it. He pushed it.
All right.
We want the voters to understand, we feel the same way. It seems like that's like a ditch, and we got to pay $4.5
Yeah.
million. I mean, it just
I wanna
don't seem feasible.
Yeah, I do want to try and keep us moving
Oh,
forward,
sorry.
given the hour. Sorry, I don't, good conversation. I don't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
So the other item for DPW, Dan,
Yeah.
is the groundwater treatment for the PFAS.
Yeah, and feel free to chime in, Kimberly.
And then I just gave them.
Oh, they got the memo. Good. So, as you can see by our memo, if you've had a chance to read, basically, Kimberly, myself, and in consultation with Robert and Barbara, talked about this item. And so the DPW, we really don't have enough information at this point to make a sound request. We're still evaluating the situation with our operational issues at Grove Pond. So I think at this time, it's probably best for us not to put forward a number we don't really have a backup for. And I really understand exactly what the scope of work is to help resolve the issues out there. So we're requesting to table this, I don't know if that's the proper word, but table this item until a future date, until we get an understanding from our consulting engineers who are doing the operational evaluation of Grove Pond out there. And when we get a clear understanding, then we could go to the select board or the water and sewer commissioners, give them an update, work with Robert and Barbara to talk about, here's what is going on. Here's, what we recommend to do out there. And here's a potential cost for that.
And there's a good chance that won't happen at this year, this town meeting.
No, it's probably going to take us, I don't know, a few more months at least till the evaluation is done. So what's going on is, as we're speaking right now, every day we're collecting data for our system and we're giving it to the engineers, whether, it's just operational data pressures, but also sampling data. So they're collecting this data and seeing how the system is running. They're getting a kind of trend and being able to evaluate properly what's going on with our system.
So just a real quick question. So what I'm understanding is that we had to add the PFSA treatment module
PFAS,
system
yeah.
on top of that, and that's causing the loss of production.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what I'm just thinking is that since this is really new technology, since the PFAs have really come to the forefront in the last 5-10 years, there might be other solutions that the engineers will like. Oh, by the way, we found somebody down 2 towns or another state over found out this is why these additional PFAS treatment modules or pieces aren't running well, and this way,
And
if you would do this adjustment, it'll bring things back up.
yeah, and they do work. We have industrial societies like Mass Waterworks, New England Waterworks, and they're countrywide. Even some of our engineers, they have projects out in like Colorado who use.
Okay, yeah, that's
So it is. There's no.
yeah. So yeah, so my overall
right,
thing is
in
that
a sense,
the firm that we're using is aware of is keeping on top of all this quickly
Right.
evolving stuff.
And
Yeah,
if I
the
could
experts.
add through the chair, that's one of the reasons why we picked Woodward and Curran. We had done a request for proposals, and Woodward and Curran has installed PFAS treatment plants, and they worked in Hudson, and Hudson had a similar production issue, and so that their experience with that is one of the reasons why we chose to bring them in for the evaluation.
So is the PFAS at Spec Pond, is that up and running?
Yes.
And we have any problems down there at all or no?
I wouldn't say any problems. We've had a reduction there in
In what?
operations in the amount in our capacity there, but it's not as significant as Grove Pond. Yeah.
And it's a different process, right?
Yeah. It's a different technology. It's granular activated carbon at Spec Pond, which has been used for years, and at Grove Pond, it's anion exchange, which is I think fairly new to the water industry for sure.
Any other questions for feedback?
Nope.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thanks.
Appreciate your time.
You can bring her all the time.
Okay. She brings the good news usually, right, Robin?
So the last item of discussion for tonight is playground. Jason, thanks for your patience.
Yeah,
Appreciate
of
it.
course. I don't really have much, other than some good news from CPC last night. So if you remember, I haven't had any opportunity to update our sheet that we presented to you last night. Thank you for the time tonight. Appreciate it. Obviously appreciate the support of the project. If you recall, the number we were looking at to fund for this year to do the complete build was about $970,000, give or take a couple $1,000 here or there. So we came here, we met with the select board, and basically the next step for us was to ask CPC for $500,000. So we brought that to them yesterday, last night. The membership there suggested maybe we should get more from CPC. So ultimately, they voted to increase that number to $750,000 and move to the next step, which is a public forum in March. So if you take CPC funding at $750,000, that would leave us needing about $220,000 left to do the fund.
16,000.
Yeah.
And some change.
So
How was that? Scott, how was that? I mean, we got numbers here. It was going to be 1.8 million. To
yeah,
finish
you
it.
didn't. You don't have the latest.
Oh, I don't?
So 1.8 is the total cost.
Right.
Current funding is 750.
No, it was about the the current, after we went through this initial beta, we sharpened pencils, and beta came down in some in their estimates, and we took some things off beta's sheet that we could do a lot cheaper if we do it through the town or through in-house. And it was about 1.5 million-ish, a little bit more than that. So then we have about 550,000 left from last year between the CPC and the capital funds. So subtracting, once we went through all that and the contingencies, we were left at like 966,000. It was what we came with last time. So, yeah, I mean, that's good news.
Good news.
I know. And the great part about CPC is the money's there. So it's not like,
And they want
there's no
And they
addition-
want to do it. That's
They want to do it. So they were very
So
supportive.
Scott, Jason, how much money is left over from the previous money we approved last year or the year before?
About 552,000 and change.
550. Okay.
550,000. Yep.
And,
So-
and CPC is going to give us 750, right?
Right.
We need to go. We need to go to the tax for how much additional?
About 220, 216.
216 some change.
That's good news.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good news.
Yeah, it's
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So it's March 1st for the public forum
Uh,
for CPC?
I think they're going to shoot for the 23rd or something because there's another project that they want to do 2 public forums on. So whatever the Wednesday is, the week of the 20th or something.
The 23rd of February
March.
or March?
So would that be a day exclusion?
At 216?
No.
No.
Just borrow.
So we need to see if that's approved before we can finalize the funding amount that's needed from this committee.
I mean, obviously that's not going to be approved until town meeting. So,
Yeah, but we need to approve, we need to kind of lay out the buckets
I
for
get
the
it.
whole project of where it's coming from.
So you want to put that into a motion then tonight?
You suggest we do it, yes.
Yeah, I guess,
Help us out with a motion.
well, my question is, so if we approve the 200 and, well, let's say a round number of 220,000 from this committee, if for some reason that CPC gets reduced, can we revisit that before it goes to town meeting? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, the good thing if it goes through, we've got 1.25 million there to play with right after town meeting. So,
Right,
because we don't have to wait for the CPC, we don't have to wait for the fiscal year for CPC funds. So,
which would be good.
yeah, I mean, that's
Okay, so yes, Jimmy, motion for $220,000 approval.
So I
I'll
make-
make a
Go ahead.
motion.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we, I'll make the motion for 220,000 for the Kitty Junction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Approved unanimously.
great. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Again.
So, yeah, if CPC has a different number,
Yeah.
at the end of
That'd
that
be
form,
good,
let
yeah.
us know, we'll reconvene and we'll figure it out from
Hopefully
there.
it'll be good. Great.
Awesome.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Jay.
All right, stay warm.
I noticed, being that we're being taped, I noticed you picked the small one, so.
Yeah. I got the big one.
They come out the hill.
He spent all my money this time.
And just,
You want to borrow some? I'll give you a couple bucks.
Yeah.
so I think 2 things just through the chair on the bridge and on the Kitty Junction playground. So as the chair mentioned, on the playground front, if there's a change on the CPC side, we'll let you know. If we have to reconvene, we've had to do that on occasion, before, town meeting, we can do that. Also on the bridge, as I was saying before, and to James's point, at the 3.5 million, it's also, contingent upon further reduction. As we get confirmation on these things, like the 500,000 bridge grant and so forth, we'll update, the whole committee.
Mhm.
And if for some reason we needed to revisit that, but my point was by the time the select board and the FinCom go to review and approve the warrant on the 4th, we'll have the exact number. 3.5 would be the worst case scenario. We'll have the exact number, and that'll be part of also all the outreach that Dan and I and others will do to inform the public. So
3.5 that we're going to approve minus whatever money if we get any grants, right?
Right.
But also, it's 4.5. We've already
Right,
got $1 million,
Yeah.
and I don't want to cover that up. We want
No,
to let the people know it's 4.
I'm
Because
glad
if someone finds out, you know,
I'm glad you brought that up because that was my final point. I think as we present this, as we do the outreach, it is a $4.5 million bridge. I know we've been focusing on the 3.5, but we will make that.
I can see a sign right above that. Town manager Robert Pomperans donated.
Yeah, I was
portion
thinking
of this.
Penard's Pats.
Well, I do have a facilities on the other side. That probably would work pretty good.
I was actually thinking of a sign going both ways that said the next 15 feet is 4.5 million of your tax.
Yeah.
But I think we really should be happy because it appears to me that all different committees and everyone is working as a unit. And I think the reason for that is when they see what other departments do, see that you're trying, everyone tries. CPC stepped up and did a little more. And I think this would make a real good challenge when they see, we all try and we all want to save money. I know everybody here wants to save money.
Yeah.
But then again, you have to spend money.
But what is that? So CPC, where would that? I know there's like 4 divisions in the CPC, right? What is that? What would that be coming out? What would that be coming out?
It comes
Open
under the
space?
open space category.
Okay, so it must be sitting pretty good in open space. Then.
Well, we increased last year to the 3%,
Yeah.
which gets us in through 3 or 4 rounds of matching through the state. So initially at the 1%, we were only in that first round. So we should have pretty good money coming in.
Yeah.
And you look at 3% of our tax base of what, 25 million?
Yep, CBC for fiscal 23 is right around, the 3% was about 682,000 just for our part.
That's
and
the
then with the
match.
match, that's before the match.
Yeah, that's
then-
before the match.
And then with the match, you can see it was 341.
That's awesome.
It's a good thing someone keeping up with all that information because if you don't, you're giving away money. If we don't give up something so we can be matched, you have to run away money.
All right.
I know at one time, because I sat on CPC for a couple of years as a member of the finance committee back when we had to have representatives. And at one time, we were the only town in the state that had approved it, but wasn't at the 3%.
Right.
Okay, so next item is our next meeting. So we voted on everything. I think we're just waiting for probably need to have a follow-up meeting at some point after in March at some point, possibly, or do we feel our work is done for now?
So what I was going to suggest, just the chair of the committee, so what we'll do in terms of next steps, Barbara and I get the chair too, because he has the spreadsheet, we'll get the final clearly for everybody, including the public, the master sheet. And why don't we, rather than schedule a meeting, if we sort of pencil in our minds, we may need a March meeting as we get closer. We'll reach out, as I mentioned, as we get the information on the bridge, you'll be getting that as we get any change on the CPC. And so, we could set a definitive date, but we could also wait as we get a little closer.
Okay, and I promise I do the minutes for December 15th, so we do need to, I'll get those done over the next week and we do need to meet at some point to approve those. Okay.
Right.
Excellent.
Thank you, Chair.
Anything else, any other discussions for this evening?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Thanks very much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.
Good conversation.